And welcome to this, our second edition of Hidden History Stories from the Secret City. I'm Keith McDaniel, along with my co host Ray Smith. Ray, thanks for joining me this morning.
You bet. Glad to be here. I'm happy to see us doing this second opportunity to talk to folks and to bring on some guests. We've got Terry Domm with us this morning. Terry is president of the Oak Ridge Heritage and Preservation Association, and we're going to talk with him a little about what's going on with the Oak Ridge History Museum. So Terry, introduce yourself and say just a word or two about what's happening there.
Well, Ray, I appreciate, first let me say I appreciate the opportunity to share information about the museum. It's, as you know, the museum is, I guess it's the second year it's been open, but part of the second year, although it's not open right now. We, of course, started the museum when the AMSE was downsized and decided not that they were going to focus on the science and DOE accomplishments, and we felt like the history of the people and their contributions in Oak Ridge was an essential piece that needed to be preserved. And so we decided to use the facility we had, the former Midtown Community Center, and utilize that for a new museum, the Oak Ridge History Museum. So that's been up and running now, and been very successful so far. We're really excited about that.
Yes, I agree with you. It is doing really well, and it's an all-volunteer staff. I well remember when we were making that transition to move the American Museum of Science and Energy. I was on the team that was determining what would go in the new museum, and our frustration was that we had such a small space. We had been caused to have to reduce from about some 50,000 square foot of exhibit space down to less than 20,000. So it was a difficult choice to decide what's going to be shown, what are we going to include, and what's not going to be able to be transferred over. And as you remember, when we got to the point of actually closing down the building where the American Museum of Science and Energy had been since the 1970s, there was an opportunity there for folks to come by and see what was not going to be moved. And the Oak Ridge Heritage and Preservation Association stepped up through volunteers and said, look, we would like to have this, we'd like to have that. You know, they just pointed out the things that would be needed if they were to start a museum. And it was during that time that there was a good bit of discussion about, can we really do this? Is this something that's feasible? And I'm really proud of those volunteers that, as you well know, that stepped up and said, okay, we'll give this a shot. And they have. They've done a really good job of operating that museum. And as you mentioned, it's closed now because of this COVID-19 virus. But I think the governor's about to let us open some things back up. He's already agreed to open up the restaurants and retail. So I think we're getting to the point where not too distant future, we'll be able to open that museum again.
Terry, let me ask a question, Ray.
Sure, go ahead.
Terry, when we come out of this, or when we get back to normal, some semblance of normal, what are the normal operating hours for the History Museum?
Well, it's open normally on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Thursday and Friday from 10 to
2.
You're right. And I knew it was, and Saturday till 3.
Right.
And is there an admission, or is it free?
There's a $5 admission for adults.
Okay.
And if you come in groups of 10 or more, the admission is reduced to $3. I routinely take groups through there, so I know the cost of $3 per person. But it started out where there wasn't a cost, and then, I don't know, several months ago, they implemented the $5 per head cost.
Right. Okay.
Terry, tell us a little about what's going on down there now as you've got a chance to do some upgrades.
Well, yeah, we're very excited about the fact that we received a grant from the state of Tennessee this year. For a total of $80,000, and we're focusing that work on upgrading the museum in a number of areas. We've already completed putting in a video surveillance system so that we can, the person sitting at the front desk can observe every part of the museum at any time. And in fact, it's a powerful system. I can take my cell phone, my smartphone, and look at the same pictures anytime I want. So I caught Ray down there taking pictures the other day.
He did. Keith, I was down there and had Katie Jett, and I had a couple of folks from that she had doing some video, and we were inside there. Of course, the electrician was working in part of the building, so we stayed out of that. But we were doing filming for this little film that I want to show here in just a minute. And right in the middle of that filming, Terry came on my iPhone with a text and said, "Ray, what are you doing down there? We're closed."
That's funny. That is funny. You know, that kind of reminds me of a real quick story, and we'll get back to the museum. When I first started working on the very first, and you'll like this, right? You'll like this story. On the very first Oak Ridge film, A Secret City, the Oak Ridge story, one of the very first things that I did is I went into the library, to the Oak Ridge room of the library, and I had a young man who worked for me to do high resolution scans of all the black and white Ed Westcott photos, because I knew I would need those later on. And he'd been in there for several days, and he said this older gentleman came up from behind him, put his hand on his shoulder and said, "What are you doing with my pictures?" And it was Ed Westcott that showed up. So you never know who's watching you these days, for sure.
That's exactly right. And you know, that collection you produced there is one of the best resources that we have now for going after Ed's photographs.
I think we did high resolution digitized probably close to 1,000 photographs at that point. So and it's that collection's been used for years now for various and sundry things. But anyway, let's get back to Terry.
Yeah, Jerry, is there anything more you'd like to tell us about what's going on down there before I show this little film to advertise it for people?
Yes, I would. Let me touch on the rest of the things we're doing. As you mentioned, the electrician being there, we're in the process of completely redoing the lighting for the museum. So it'll be modernized. We'll have lights to more effectively display the work posted on the walls. We're also, we have purchased, I believe it's 15 display cabinets, lighted, lockable display cabinets. And those we're in the process of filling with artifacts. Personally, I feel strongly that I know some people are verbal, some people are visual, and some people like to sit and read a lot of things. I'm not a person that likes to go in and just read a whole lot of text on the wall. I like to go in and see the actual items that were part of the history. So we're going to extensively expand the amount of artifacts that we have for people to see down there. And I think that's going to be really special. We're also working right now on upgrading the wall displays. We've got a couple sections that are being produced. There's one on the history of the den, the Wildcat Den, and one, I think, dealing with the telephone switchboard that we have. But and we're looking at some movable wall sections and some hanging displays, the rod and rail systems like you see out at the K-25 Museum and the AMSE, where they're very flexible systems where you can display things. The idea being that it needs to be reconfigurable easily so that there's always something new to attract people back. It's not a one-time visit for the museum. So we're excited about that. We're well along the way on everything except the wall systems. And with the coronavirus shutdown where we can't meet and go and measure and think through things, we have a little bit of a setback on that, but we'll be on that soon. I would like to mention, by the way, that Betty Stokes and Emily Honeycutt were the chairs of the museum committee, and they, with the other committee members, which I won't name because I'm sure to leave somebody out if I do, have done an excellent job in guiding this whole process. It's, you know, not only collecting displays, getting them mounted. Bobby Martin, our archivist, has done a good job of getting things up on the wall, and but they've also been stocking the gift shop and all the little things that go with getting the museum up and running. So I just kind of like to give them a little credit here while we're talking about this.
Hey, Terry, let me ask you, did everything that's in the museum come from AMSI, or did it also come from like private collections?
No, some of it did. We did rescue some of it from AMSI, but a lot of it is from private collections. Lloyd Stokes has an extensive collection of artifacts at early Oak Ridge. And
right.
What we're finding now is a lot of people are dropping by and saying, hey, you know, I've got this item or these items that we'd like to see preserved, and if it fits, you know, we'd like you to take it. So we're seeing more of that too.
That's an example of one of the artifacts that did come from the American Museum of Science and Energy is that large panoramic image of the city of Oak Ridge. It's now on the walls inside the Wildcat Den. But as Terry said, most of what you'll find down there is artifacts that have been donated or been collected over the years by the ORHPA, and there's a wide variety. There's several examples. Of course, the Lloyd Stokes collection, as mentioned, is a room in and of itself. There's also a room that the Manhattan Project National Historical Park provides a display, a rotating display. They have brought a couple of them down there, maybe 3 now, and they will continue to provide exhibits in that area. So there's a lot of display artifacts that are displayed, and I'm glad to hear that even more are going to be. Of course, these cabinets that they've brought in are lockable cabinets, so you can put artifacts in there and feel confident that they're going to be safe. So let's take just a moment and let me show you that short film that has been produced by Explore Oak Ridge, Katie Jett and her people, and it's where I got caught when I was down there doing it for them. But let's see if we can take a look at it. The Oak Ridge History Museum is a place where you can come and experience the Manhattan Project era and what the people were like and how they lived. The alphabet houses are here. The toy room is here. You can see the things that they experienced during the Manhattan Project. This museum came into being because of the transition of the American Museum of Science and Energy, where they transferred it to a new location and were not able to include all of the history of the city. So the Oak Ridge Heritage and Preservation Association has formed the Oak Ridge History Museum to focus on the people history of the city of Oak Ridge. So come and learn about the secret city of Oak Ridge during the Manhattan Project, what the people actually experienced who were here during that time.
All right. Good job, Ray.
Well, thank you. Everything's all right but the narrator. I don't know about the narrator.
He sounded familiar.
Yeah, he did. He got a distinctive accent.
That's true. That is true. So Terry, do you have, of course, when things get back to normal to some degree, other than the things that you've mentioned about changes that that are taking place, do you have any like long-term goals or long-term plans of things that you'd like to see happen?
Long-term plans.
You know, next 3 to 5 years, something like that.
uh, well, maybe probably not so specific, but of course, I'd like to see a lot more artifacts on display. I'd like to see us improve the quality of the exhibits. One of the things we're wanting to do is to put more technology into the museum down the road. Things, for example, where a visitor could read a QR code. Ray mentioned the murals of the Oak Ridge City, and I could see us having a QR code where you put your phone up there and it brings up a discussion of what's on that mural, or brings up a short video that elaborates on details of what that particular subject is. So the technology is one thing. We want to also improve our website. I think we certainly have one, but you know, today it's the young people that we need to attract. We're doing a great job of getting old Oak Ridgers that want to come back and relive their youth of growing up here. But we're not all going to be around here forever. I say we, I did not grow up in Oak Ridge, by the way. But so we've got to figure a way to make this relevant to the new generations coming along. And that's going to be a challenge, I think, but we're thinking about that.
That's true. The new generation, they get all their information right here. So you know, they get everything on their phone. So that's a challenge for all of us.
And decide whether they're going to come and visit over their phone too. So
True.
That's exactly right. I'd like to put a plug in for David Hackett. He has provided in some exhibits in the museum that are pre-Oak Ridge. And I think that's a point that we think about our hidden history here. There's a history of this area prior to Oak Ridge coming in 1942. And to see some of the geological exhibits that he has there kind of helps ground you when you first come in. And by the way, when you're coming into that room, that large meeting area that has displays all around the walls now, that's the Wildcat Den. A little bit of hidden history there. The Midtown Community Center was used for years as a gathering place for these young people that you're talking about now. They wouldn't do it like they did back then. They didn't have cell phones and couldn't text one another, so they would get together in the evenings there at the Wildcat Den. And so that building has a history of its own, and it's on display in there as well. There's a good fold-out exhibit that talks about the history of the Midtown Community Center and the Wildcat Den. So the History Museum, Oak Ridge History Museum, has a lot to offer, even to young people.
I had a friend of mine who grew up in Oak Ridge, or was a teenager during the Manhattan Project in Oak Ridge, and he said, "Yeah, he said that's where we used to go when we were teenagers." He says, "And today we go there because we're old folks." So, but yeah, it's the museum is quite something, and it really fills a gap in our community to be able to tell the story of the lives of the town, and not just the science and the major events that took place in Oak Ridge.
I will also go ahead and plug another video. We won't show it here, but remind you that it's out there, that Explore Oak Ridge has made, that focuses on all of the museums that are in Oak Ridge, not just the Oak Ridge History Museum, but it includes some information about the American Museum of Science and Energy, also about the new K-25 History Center that just opened in the last week of February. And of course, it only was open for a few weeks until it had to be closed, but it'll be open again. And the Children's Museum, where the American Museum, or where the Manhattan Project National Historical Park is located. And also there is a number of historical exhibits up there including the flat top house that couldn't be moved when the American Museum of Science and Energy relocated. So that video is out there on YouTube as well, and it's on Facebook. You can find it on my Facebook page.
Very good. Terry, is there anything else you want to add before we wrap this up?
Well, I just like to add a comment to what Ray was just saying. I think collaboration between the Oak Ridge museums is a critical thing, key thing, in that we've got a lot of what I'll call relatively small museums, but together we can make a much bigger attraction to get people to look and say, hey, we can come to town. We're looking at marketing things and doing joint things with some of the other museums. And so we can together tell the whole story and perhaps get people to come in and spend the whole day and have, for example, we're looking at a museum pass that people can get that will allow entry to all of them. So Explore Oak Ridge is doing a good job in trying to market these museums.
I agree. Yeah, Katie's and her group are doing a really good job. And you're right. We have a destination here, a heritage tourism destination that other places would die for, because it's got an attraction of potential that we need to really work on. And I think they're doing a good job. But as Terry says, collaboration between all of them is vitally important.
All right. Well, very good. Well, Terry, thank you for being with us today. We appreciate it. And then once the Oak Ridge History Museum opens back up to where folks can go in there, we're going to encourage everybody to go and take a look and take a visit.
Thank you for having me.
Sure. Ray, we're going to come back in a couple of weeks and do another one of these, Zoom podcasts. You got somebody lined up for the next time, don't you?
I do. I've got Steve Oliphant lined up. He's agreed to talk to us about the hidden history of the hiking trails in Oak Ridge. We have some 80 plus miles of greenway, and he tells me that there's actually over 100, closer to 120 or 130 miles in the city of Oak Ridge where you can find some of the best hiking trails. And what's interesting about Steve, he's the son of George Oliphant, who I used to work for out at Y12. And Steve knows the history of this area just like the back of his hand. And he spends a couple of days a week working from his home, but he has the home here in Oak Ridge, and he also has another home, but he works part of the time here in Oak Ridge. And he takes a hike or two every week. Now, I've been hiking too, especially during the last few weeks, and we're getting out on trails that people don't normally find and don't normally, I don't see many people on them. But he'll talk to us about things like a huge silo that's out on Hall Ridge. Mm-hmm. And we'll find other things like that he'll talk about. But Steve Oliphant will be with us next time.
All right, that sounds great. And we'll be back in a couple of weeks. And Terry and Ray, good to see you this morning. And thanks for joining us.
You bet.
See you.